I'm curious to know what actually happened with their Xbox because I was getting a little bit worried about that, but now I know you just left it behind.
Gave it to David.
$400 leave behind. Wow. Okay, taking it to the next level.
Hey, podcast listener, even if you are alone in your entrepreneurial journey, know that today, right now in your earbuds, you are joined by thousands of entrepreneurs from all around the globe seeking to grow better, more profitable, location-independent businesses. If you'd like to learn more about what we do and download our entire back catalog, check out tropicalmba.com. Yeah, buddy. Happy Thursday morning. It's the Tropical MBA podcast. This one's at tropicalmba.com/location independent. Today, I am joined, as is per the usual, by the boss man, the CEO of our fine organization, and the only man I know who makes a Miata look cool.
Hey, man,
how's that card treating you, man?
There's plenty of guys that look cool in a Miata. Top down. I don't have a top down on mine, man. I got a hard top.
This Tropical MBA podcast, of course, used to be called the Lifestyle Business Podcast, is a place where we believe that building a business is the best way to create more personal freedom and opportunity in your life.
I think what you're trying to get at is if you've never listened to the Tropical MBA podcast, what are we all about, Dan? We are all about location independence, personal freedom, building businesses, but we are also about...
Well, okay, so I think there's been this crazy thing that happened, Ian, which is I think that the cost of time and location freedom has crashed, right? And I think our generation is kind of dealing with that. Like, what are the implications of it? Because the generation before us, I mean, not so many decades ago, maybe one, the cost of earning back your time and earning back your freedom of movement might be hitting it big, which is a giant risk. It might be working your whole life at a quote good job, which is also a giant risk, or becoming a bum, which is also a giant risk. I mean, for every, famous rock star, there's 10 who just didn't make it, and maybe because they went for that big risk, they wanted that kind of time and mobility freedom to do their art and stuff like that. They weren't able to do the good career. So, I mean, these things were extraordinarily expensive, and now all of a sudden they're not so expensive. And so I think part of what we do here on the show is talk about how we can build businesses that grow and scale and create real wealth while we enjoy the time and freedom mobility. So it's not all of a sudden, hey, I got to sit in a basement for 10 years and then I'll emerge, hopefully, and someone will buy this company. It's like, actually, we're just going to do these things in tandem.
Yeah, that was kind of the old model. When we're designing and developing these businesses, Dan, we kind of design them with lifestyle in mind. We say, okay, I kind of know what I want my P&L to look like, and where on my balance sheet is happiness, or where on my balance sheet is travel or location independence, because that has to be baked in there for us to make these businesses viable. And I think the older generation, it was always like, okay, I'm going to work and then I'm going to have that afterwards. And we're basically saying That's the old model. A lot of this stuff is already figured out for us. We don't have to do a lot of those things. So we're going to work and we're going to have that as well. Cake and eat it too.
Another really critical element of this show, though, for me is that, and of our community, is that we don't think this stuff's easy, and we don't think that you can follow the 10-point Dan and Ian trusted guide to making this happen. You're not going to be able, I was having a great conversation with a set of entrepreneurs, you're not going to be able to do exactly what we did, and that's not going to work for you now. If you want to be like X person, you can't be like X person. Right? Because what they were is they were innovative and they had the right timing and they had the right product market fit. And so that's how you need to emulate them, not emulate them by doing what they did. And a correlate to that is this stuff, the cost has dropped, but it's not easy. And we believe in hard work and hustle. We're very hard workers. I think, you can look at what separates the people who've made successful location independence. You could say, is it resources? Is it hard work? Is it good luck? Is it time in front of laptop? And, you take all these variables and I'd say, I'll put my money on time in front of laptop. actually. You could be a good deal cutter, have great skills or all these things, but a lot of times it is the people that are willing to invest the time in it. And I think one of the most important concepts we've ever talked about on this show is something we call the 1,000-day principle, which is that, and Damien has broken it down a little bit more to say that, the first year of those 1,000 days is you learn a skill. The second year is you sell that skill. And the third year is you decipher how to scale that skill. That's one way that those 1,000 days can look like. But the general idea is that if you want to go from corporate path to making money from a scalable location independent business, you're going to have to take a huge step back. And in particular, if you're on a successful corporate path, that step back might be, assuming you don't have savings that you can invest in a business, that might be humiliating. And it might be rice and beans territory. And, we think the benefits are worth it. And so that's something that we talk about, is trying to get people through that difficult period where you are taking a step back and learning new things and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think we were at a little bit of an advantage, Dan, when we started, because we didn't really have anything.
We were bums.
Per se.
We were bums.
And so we didn't have to give a lot up.
I had 50, give or take $10,000+ in credit card debt is basically like, who knows what that was.
Yeah, I was going to say, I hope you're going to say in debt. You definitely didn't have $10,000. When you look at this 1,000-day principle, Dan, I think the things that you get paid for today are the skills that you built like 3 or 4 years ago. So that's another thing to look at in your business. It's like, oh, okay, I made $1 million this year in my business. Those are all skills in relationships and products that you've been building for the last 2 or 3 years. What are you doing today that's going to make that $1 million or that $5 million 3 years from now? It's just something that I'm starting to think about with this 1,000-day principle. And when you get paid for what you're doing. So it's kind of unrelated, but I just want to tack that on there.
Ian, this week's topic is one of our favorites. It's all about the location-independent lifestyle and how it gets done. So let's just jump right into it. All right, Ian, this week, listener Austin gave us a call and has some questions, and we'll use this call as a launch pad to get into our thoughts on the costs and logistics of location-independent living.
Hi, Dan. My name is Austin, and I'm from exportabroad.com. Me and my co-founder are considering doing the digital nomad type lifestyle, and I'm reading your most recent blog post about the real costs of permanent travel. And I guess I'm just wondering, are there any good resources for people just getting into it to find housing and make sure that the housing has reliable Wi-Fi and things like that? I mean, there's a lot of talk about the cities that are good for the digital nomad lifestyle. But I'm a little bit more interested in getting down to the nitty-gritty about, specifically how do I find an apartment? How do I find, maybe a co-working space or things like that? Any information you could tell me about that, that'd be great. Thanks.
All right, Austin, thank you so much for your call. We love it when people give the show a ring. You can call us and ask us a question at 888-554-8428. I think people still use telephones, Ian. So
yes. They do.
You can't text us at that number, unfortunately. Austin, we have 6 general principles that we want to talk about this lifestyle, and hopefully you'll find them useful. Okay, so here's the first point, man. And I don't want to sound like a jerk, but don't let this be the resistance. It's not really that big of a deal. I know it's seductive and it's fun to kind of sit back home and hang on TripAdvisor for 6 months or whatever, but it's just, this stuff isn't really that big of a deal. And part of the reason why I think this might be a fundamental thing here. Part of the reason why there's not so much content like this out there, like the location-independent quick start guide to Peru and the location-independent quick start guide to wherever, is that people don't value the content very much. Here's the thing. It's very expensive content to produce. Basically, you need to have a network effect. You need to have people producing the content on the ground, constantly uploading it, and constantly changing it, because this content change. Where's the best Wi-Fi in Bali? Well, that just changes every 2 months. So who's going to be there to update that every single time it changes? The second thing is that people don't really care about it that much. I would even guess that Austin, our brilliant, amazing entrepreneur listener, doesn't really care that much, right? Because I'm going to tell him where he can get his Wi-Fi in Bali, and then he's going to get there and he's going to have a different answer anyway within 24 hours. There's something that works better for him. So in other words, there's a reason why we don't know this stuff, and there's a reason why it doesn't exist out there in the world. It's because it's just not that big of a deal.
It's not that big of a deal, and I think the more you do it, the more you learn, and the more you figure out. So
yeah, I guess so where are you going to get Wi-Fi? So well, where aren't you going to get Wi-Fi? You know what I mean? I guess in certain places it's going to be spotty or whatever, but these problems can basically be solved. I mean, here's another way to put it. And I was talking about this with listener Paul, who actually came here to Deval last night. We were talking about it. It's like if you have a business that needs plug and play, you need to freaking get out of your airplane and open up the laptop and you need to be on Skype. I mean, you're basically in this realm where you need to be paying for an Airbnb or you need to be paying for a hotel and a business class, level hotel, $80 to $200 a night kind of thing. Get in there, get plugged. And then that's it. And we were kind of going back and forth, Ian. That's about a $35K annual budget for that. I need hot Wi-Fi the moment I touch down, and that's amazingly inexpensive, by the way.
Okay. So back up here for a second. So basically, Austin's asking, the real cost of permanent travel, any good resources, Wi-Fi, all that stuff. I think the first thing to do is to say the number one thing that's been a threat to our businesses, Dan, is not being able to be on the phone. And so if that's one of your requirements, if you need to be on the phone and you need to be in a decent time zone, you need to pick a certain level of accommodations. Like you said, you need to pick Airbnb or you need to be in a nice hotel. And you also need to pick the right place in the world to do that from. I can't be on the phone, talking to valet customers if I'm living in Bali. The Wi-Fi isn't strong enough yet still, and I'm not in the right time zone. So when you start to think about your location, also start to think about your type of business that you have. And what you're talking about here, Dan, is this $35K annual budget. Yeah, I think very easily you can travel to many places in the world and run your business for that amount.
And I mean 35 cost. So I'm not saying I make $35,000 in sales a year so I can, $35,000, that's what it's going to cost you if you want to live that way. If you don't want to do that, I think you need to have a 1 week scrum period, let's call it. If you need to organize this stuff on the ground, say you want to get a monthly or a month-to-month lease, you need to organize a Wi-Fi connection. I mean, I'm talking maybe check your emails in the evenings, but why not spend a week, going around, knocking on doors, meeting with expats, figuring out a way to get yourself up and running. That's just the reality of it. I mean, you're going to have to be able to step away from your business for a week if you don't have the budget to sort of check into the business class accommodations.
This is what we did up until only a few years ago, Dan. Is we would show up to a location, we would fret about spending the $55 a night on the nice hotel, so we'd stay in a place for $35 until we found the right people to talk to and found the right place, the best value, all this stuff. So, what you're saying is look, if you don't have the $35K budget a year, there is a way to hack it. You can show up to a location, but just expect that it's going to take you a week to figure out perfect logistics. Whereas kind of the business class now is you show up, you just land in the hotel and then you're there.
And I've talked myself back to a more genuine answer to Austin's first question about finding Wi-Fi or something. There's not a site that's WiFiFinder.com that's going to get you out of that week scrum. The site that's going to get you out of the week scrum is Agoda or Booking.com or Airbnb.com. Those are the sites that solve that problem. And then at some point when you decide that maybe you're just running at that 35K run rate for 2 or 3 weeks until you find your right place, and then you decide you want to lay low and cut your costs, then spend that 2 to 5 to 7 days or whatever it's going to be to get yourself set up. And that just seems to be the reality of the situation right now for me. I'd be interested in alternate. Maybe there is a Wi-Fi Finder website out there that solves this problem that I don't know about. So number 2, Ian, number 2 principle or thought on the cost and logistics of location independent living. And this is one that you wrote. It's very clever. The cost of living anywhere is the same cost of living anywhere. What do you mean by this?
I don't know. I wrote that. The cost of living anywhere is basically the same cost as living anywhere. I think at a certain level, Dan, and this isn't at every level, we ran the math on it. So basically every city in the world that I traveled to in the last year, with the exception of Amsterdam, you can get a very nice apartment with very fast Wi-Fi for $1,000. From there, if you don't eat like an asshole and you don't go out every night of the week, I think that you can make it happen for $1,500 a month on top of that. So we're basically looking at $2,500. And for that cost, yes, I don't own a car. I don't have car insurance or any of that stuff. But I think for $2,500, you can basically live in any city in the world fairly comfortably, with the exception of, New York, Amsterdam, and probably San Francisco and a few other select cities. But generally not the cities that I'm hanging out in. Like, basically, this is to say, like, the cost of living in San Diego is the same cost as living in Playa del Carmen. So it's basically the same, given that I'm looking for a certain level of accommodations. And that for me is what we talked about in the first point, Dan, which is I want to plop down. I want the Wi-Fi to be perfect. And I want basically everything to be figured out. So like once you get to that $35,000 a year spend, that level, I think that you can live in 80% of the cities in the world.
Okay, that's first off, I love our fact checking on this show is how we have an incredible track record. Number two, I think it's remarkable that you can say eating like an asshole. I've never heard that in my life, and it's something about it is deeply hilarious to me. Like there's something mean about the way that like I am going to destroy this hoagie right now. It does not stand a chance against me.
It's eating the hoagie when you know you shouldn't, and it's spending $65 on a salad or whatever.
Right, yeah. On my artisan goat cheese, delightful cranberry salad.
That sounds delicious.
Another thing I think that's relevant to this point, Ian, is that when you stay in one location traditionally, like the traditional American lifestyle, you tend to tack on things that aren't in the travel lifestyle. Things like the snowblower bought on consignment or whatever, the LCD, HBO triple package,
Correct.
The Lexus, these kinds of things, the car insurance, like these kinds of things kind of get you up to that 35, 45K annual in raw costs, which if you kind of peel back that, hit the road, what you're saying is kind of come see, come sa.
So I get it. I've been in San Diego 3 weeks. I'm getting ready to leave. Consumer tendencies, if you're not careful, they definitely have a chance to creep into your life. Life is very easy here, right? Like, where everything is. It makes it that much easier to run down to Best Buy or something like that. So I guess I'm assuming with the $2,500 a month spend, that you're not doing any of that frivolous consumer spending, basically. And it's to say that it's very easy to do in some places.
Yeah, point number 3 is related, which is, shed those expensive, specific, and heavy items. You don't need specialized items. You can pick these things up when you get rid of the snowblower and the boat. You can pretty much rent a boat anywhere you go. I mean, we're really moving into this ownership mindset into a more renting mindset. And I think that's part of the internet age, Ian, is that, sites like Airbnb, what they do is they activate inventory that's already out there in the world. We've got enough stuff. There's enough cars out there. You don't need to own your own. You can just rent one when you need one, and that's getting easier and easier. The cost of renting is getting cheaper, essentially.
Yeah, this excess inventory thing, right? I mean, it's just amazing how all these platforms and services have started to allow us to leverage that kind of thing. Like shedding these excess things, I think, Dan, also means shedding things that you don't need to buy, right? So it's like, if I'm in the United States, like I have a tendency to I'm going mountain bike riding, like I definitely need to go to the store and buy a helmet. But there's ways to get around that, right? I would have a tendency to buy the helmet here. If I was in Amsterdam, I'd have a tendency to figure out a way to get a cheap helmet or rent it or something like that, because I can't afford to.
You don't ride without a helmet? I mean, what are you really protecting?
I definitely ride without a helmet in Amsterdam, and I think I would get some laughs.
Number 4, cultivate the leave it behind mindset. So, I still remember this vivid moment for me when I was checking out of my hotel, and it was the first time the hotel clerks ever hey, the bellhop or whatever told me that you left 2 pairs of shorts in your bedroom. And I was like, I know. That was my plan. And there's something really, it sounds simple, but I think for a lot of people and myself, it it's a very odd thing to do. Like once you buy something, like that's your thing and you need to deal with it. And like something needs to happen. Like at best, I'll put it up on Craigslist. At worst, I'll, give it to somebody or, you know what I mean? Like it has to be dealt with. And it's like, it doesn't have to be. You can just leave stuff behind. And when you get used to this, it feels wonderful. And I've started scaling up the leave it behind thing. Now I'm getting on a roll. I've left Xboxes and guitars. And because when I buy the Xbox, I'm thinking, how much is this going to cost me per day? Is it a good, value for me in my life? Do I want to win Grand Theft Auto 5 or whatever this, over the next 2 months? Is that worth whatever it's going to cost me? And if yes, go for it. And when you leave, donate it. If you don't have the time, leave it behind and just say, Merry Christmas to the maid or whatever. That's just no problem. And I mean, you can make, people have made judgments. People would stay someplace a couple days longer because they got to unload stuff or whatever. That just doesn't make sense to me anymore. And I think it's interesting to cultivate this Zen mindset of, leave the jeans behind when you're going to the tropical island.
My basic principle on this one, and I'm curious to know what actually happened with their Xbox because I was getting a little bit worried about that, but now I know you just left it behind.
Gave it to David.
$400 leave behind. Wow. Okay, taking it to the next level. My basic idea for the leave it behind plan, Dan, is if I don't have a plan to use that item in the next 3 months, I'll leave it behind. So like I'll leave my jeans behind, I'll leave sweaters behind, all that kind of stuff. Like if I'm like rolling into summertime, I'm leaving it behind because I just start to think, right, about all the places I'm going to have to bring those jeans with me, right? And it gets ridiculous. Like, I'm going to have to bring it to 6 different airports and like I'm not going to wear them no. Get rid of the jeans.
Well, you are just so damn fashionable too. You got to upgrade with every new fashion cycle as well. So I mean, that's the other thing about this, Ian, is that like the dark consumer spots on the globe seem to be diminishing. Like back in the day, like you travel to Vietnam, you'd be like, oh my gosh, I need to bring like an extra like security blanket. I need like a mosquito net, and I need a book that I can reference like when I get bit by a mosquito. Like they don't have reference books for like what goes down like with the health crisis or whatever in Vietnam. And I just feel like, iPhone kind of solves for all this stuff, like Google it or whatever, so it does seem like you don't need to prepare as much stuff. Even when I was looking, I recently made a packing post. I can't get away from how much I love seeing what people put in their kit. I'll link up to it if you haven't read the blog lately and you're listening to this podcast. And on 2008, what was a giant section of my backpack and a giant section of my post is now just iPhone.
Yeah.
It's basically replaced, like, I used to carry books. Imagine that. Remember what those things were like?
Yeah.
They were heavy for the, I love this idea of like, what's the value you get from something versus the density of it? Like iPhone is definitely like the most dense item that I travel with. Underwear are very dense. Don't try to bring 3 pairs of underwear. They're very useful and they're very dense.
Totally.
There's a lot of value in a small space. Whereas with jeans, for example, their, value ratio is a little bit higher or whatever.
Ditch it. Just ditch it.
All right. Point number 5, the velocity of your travel, of your movement around the globe is the number one impact on the cost of your location independent lifestyle. I think this is very interesting, Ian. We talk occasionally about the velocity of money. This is interesting how you can change the velocity of your traveling is the number one impact. It's not necessarily where you live. It's how fast you're moving.
Yeah, this happened to me last year. Like I said, I traveled, I think, to 7 different countries. Definitely the most expensive year of my life, by far. Part of the reason for that was I was traveling to countries in places that I'd never been before, some that I didn't know people in, and a lot that I didn't have a understanding of the infrastructure. And so, like, number one, the plane tickets will cost you, right? Because you're hopping on a plane very often. But number two, like, you're just throwing money at stuff to get it working, right? If you don't have time, like I don't have time to just sit around for 2 weeks and like figure stuff out. So I'm just like throwing money at it, right? Like I'm just buying the Airbnb place, kind of, spend a little bit more money on it. So like the faster or the more you do that, obviously the more expenses you're going to incur.
Yeah. And one thing when we were thinking about expenses and stuff, one shift that I've made that's only tangentially related to this is that when I invest in an apartment for a couple months, I think of my rent now as a percentage of my net worth and not as a percentage of my cash flow. I think it's very common, Ian, for me, like, earlier in my life, I would say like, oh yeah, I made like $3,000 this month. So it's okay to spend like 1,000 of it, or if you're living in New York, like 2,700 of it to live in this apartment. And now I just don't think like that. I think like, look, this place costs us this much. How much percentage of my net worth is that? Have you started doing that too? I think it's kind of like a employed entrepreneur kind of mindset shift that's worth bringing up.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I was having a conversation with Taylor. This is a little bit off topic, but we're talking about like how much car should you buy, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I threw out the number like 5%. Like 5% of your net worth is like a good number, I think, to spend on your car. And that's coming from a car guy. So that's why I drive a CRX. It tells you about the direction of my net worth.
That's right.
This hacking, the cost creep, I talked a lot about.
By the way, the cars that we used to drive, the entrepreneur mobiles, so to speak, is a great way to vet potential relationships, I think. Because if a woman is willing to date you in your entrepreneur mobile, I think she's a keeper.
Yeah.
So there's extra benefits.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Hacking this thing. So we're talking about the velocity of your travel and how it can be the number one cost and price creep. One way to hack that, if you're just starting off and you want to travel, maybe the first year you just travel to 2 or 3 different places and you do it with an established infrastructure, or you do it where people are already there. And so that mitigates a lot of risks and potential costs. I was going to countries where I didn't have any relationships or infrastructure, very expensive, like I said. So if you're trying to hack it, go to 2 or 3 places. They might not be your favorite cities, but where you know people, and you can just kind of start to get a feel for this thing.
Hey, this is one of our travel maxims, B locations with A players over A locations with no players.
Absolutely.
Number 6, Ian, get your systems in place if you want growth and travel. One of the things that we believe is that you can grow wealth, you can grow a successful business while you live this lifestyle. You don't need to say, in some ways I think it's a weakness, Ian, to say, that feeling like you've been on the road for a couple weeks and you're like, okay, I'm just going to rent this amazing, awesome apartment with, 10 million helpers running all around because I'm going to sit here and I'm going to grind for 2 months. And it's like, really? Like your business depends on like your ability to wake up and grind every day. I mean, in some ways I appreciate, that mindset, but also I like this idea of the business has to be independent of you. It has to be able to run on systems, processes, people. It can't depend on your ability to wake up with a great attitude and a good cup of coffee every single morning to make sure that the thing keeps going, especially if you're going to live this lifestyle. You're going to get thrown curveballs all the time. Occasionally I'll get the, aspiring location independent entrepreneur exasperated, like, I can't find Wi-Fi today. And it's like, if your business is to the point where you can't take a couple days off of the Wi-Fi's, I think that's a great place to get started, is get those SODs up, get the SOPs going, and make sure that you're not going to lose your lunch if a couple days the Wi-Fi goes out in your favorite cafe.
With that point in mind, Dan, I think we're saying when we designed our businesses, basically we had the idea of designing a business that's going to bring us profits, but then also one that lets us live the kind of life that we want to live, right? I'm gonna say what I think here, and then you can tell me what you think. But for me, it always starts with the business, even if it's just like half an inch, and then it's the lifestyle, basically. And so when I'm like running around looking for Wi-Fi, like to your point, like basically like I've got systems and processes in my business so I don't have to do that. So like I can afford to miss almost any day in my business because I've set up processes, systems, and people in my business so I don't have to be there for that. And so I think, basically what I'm saying is like if you set up your business just even a little bit ahead of the lifestyle, you can make that happen. If the lifestyle is your number one priority, like you might find yourself running around looking for Wi-Fi. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because you want to hit the surf break or whatever. I understand that. I see this as a great opportunity to make your business more adaptable. When you talk to business brokers, our friends Joe and Justin are business brokers. Jock's a business broker. One of the sexiest things you can say about a business, Ian, you know what I'm about to say? Absentee owner. That is just something that people want to hear. People want to know. People want to buy assets that don't need to be, run by the ruthless CEO that lords over TPS reports. So I think it's a great opportunity, Ian, to put those systems in place so that the thing can be on a flywheel and keep running while you're doing your weekly scrum. Maybe every 3 or 4 months, you want to move to a new exotic location. And if it's going to be Phuket, Thailand or whatever, you're going to need that week to find your villa and to make sure that your Wi-Fi is online. And, you might even need to like do crazy things like sign a year lease for that Wi-Fi, a year contract. By the way, like this is kind of related to some of our other points is sometimes you have to do stuff like that, like factor the cost of, I got fiber internet in Bali, for example, when I was there. I signed a 2-year contract and I did the opposite of what you generally do with that. I just squished all the costs into the time period that I was going to be using it. And it's like, hey, yes, it's triple what the normal amortization would be, but I need it and it's good value for me. So whereas maybe traditionally I would have that mindset like, oh, I can't sign that contract because I'm not going to be here for 2 years. So like it forces you to kind of reconsider those types of decisions. All right, so
plus you can always just break it. You could always just say, I'm not paying anymore.
Yeah.
No credit reports over there.
So, Austin, thank you so much for the question. Yeah, I mean, it's a great exercise in negotiation, in air quotes. I feel like, Austin was really searching for tactical advice. I am probably not the best at that. Maybe for some of the reasons that we mentioned is that we just don't use a lot of tactical tools outside of Airbnb and outside of networking and things like Dynamite Circle and getting on Agoda. And I kind of feel bad on the one hand. On the other hand, I feel
I don't feel bad. I think hopefully we did Austin a little bit more of a service, right? Like we can sit here and talk about, Austin. As soon as you like the realtor shows you the place, like open up your phone, get on the Wi-Fi, get on speedtest.net, make sure the Wi-Fi is fast, all that stuff. Like you're going to figure out in the first 2 months. What you really need to do, 2 hours. Sorry. What you really need to do is think about the fundamentals of what goes into this lifestyle, and are you building your business to be able to sustain this lifestyle if this is something that what you really want, because like I said, in my mind, like business comes first. Like you come up with the business, you build this lifestyle into it, and then you make it sustainable. Like none of this stuff works. Speedtest.net doesn't work because you're too broke to even have an iPhone, son. You know what I mean? Can't do it.
That's great. Well, anyway, Austin, hey, I'll tell you what, congratulations on wanting to take this thing location independent. One of the things I think about, Ian, is like the dream that I had of this, the freedom of being able to roam around the world, like that dream has been delivered on, like I still, every morning I appreciate it that I can just wake up and walk down to the local Starbucks and it's Wednesday morning. Or I can decide that, wouldn't it be great if I would, check out, I heard there's a great meetup in Jakarta next week and I want to go there. I still appreciate that so much. So it is these businesses. That's why the business comes first, right? Because that's the bearer of the good fruit. So yeah, absolutely, buddy. So Ian, before we wrap up the episode, at the end here, I'd like to mention some news items. This week in startups has been absolutely crushing it. Actually, let me play a quick clip that I pulled out of the one of Jason's most recent interviews with Marc Cuban. Phenomenal interview. Here's the clip.
If you don't know your product, service, or industry better than everybody else, whoever does is going to kick your ass. Look, there's no shortcuts. That's the number one rule. There are no shortcuts. You got to grind. Grind.
I played the clip because I really want you guys to go listen to this episode. Downloaded it this week in startups. It's a really inspiring episode, and Marc talks about a lot of the things that he's thinking about for the future. This is a guy who's sort of got his ear to the ground, and he's always an inspiration. And he's one of these guys that's like exercise that hustle muscle. There was also a great interview with the founder of HipChat, a new software that we've been using in our business, Ian, to help keep our team communicating effectively from anywhere in the world. And that was a great interview too. JP, who runs the China business cast and came to Tropical MBA and runs ProTeethGuard, which is doing phenomenally well as well, I've recently heard, mentioned about our last episode, Ian, that Alibaba is actually bigger than Yahoo, and left a pretty informative comment on that episode along with some links. So thank you, JP, for fact-checking us. That's really useful to us. By the way, all of the links and stuff that we're talking about on this episode is tropicalmba.com/location independent. One more thing, Ian, I just want to mention before we get off the show. We've been running a little bit longer. Do you think, is this like, are we into like second or third album category where like at the beginning we're trying to keep things real tight and useful, and now we're like sort of getting lazy and we just go on and we're like do the long jam sessions and like we're like Radiohead on the 6th album. That's what I feel like now.
I hope not, man.
Here's what I want to say. I got an email the other day from the assistant of a successful guru, like a person that presents themselves as someone who's successful online. I just want to say this, like, look, reaching out to influencers online is not something that you should be having your virtual assistant doing. And if you do have your virtual assistant doing, which is cool, you know, make it a template so that email is from you. When I get these emails from people, it's like, hey, you know, I'm the assistant of, you know, so-and-so important person, you know, they really want to do this and that with you. And I'm thinking to myself, like, really? Am I that unimportant that you couldn't have just kicked me a 5-minute email, or you couldn't have had your assistant write the damn thing and then you couldn't just send it? How long does it take to hit a send button nowadays? And so this is just such a,
I'm going to tell you what's going on here. I know this.
I can't, like, really? Like, I'm talking to your Manila-based virtual assistant right now. Like, how hard would it be? Like, how unimportant am I right now? I mean, is my ego so large, Ian, that am I the only person bruised by this? Is that what's happening?
No. I think you're just misinterpreting what's going on here. Let me take a stab at this, because this is hyper annoying, and I think people are doing it for the wrong reasons. So I think, like, somewhere along the lines, like, somebody told that person, like, it's baller to have an assistant, right? The same way, like, if, you know, it's a baller thing to do. And so his assistant contacted you, like, as if this person was famous or didn't have the 5 minutes to contact you, you know?
5 minutes? I'm talking about 5 seconds, man. You know what? Man, have your assistant lie to me. Just lie to me. Like, make a separate email address and just have your assistant write in your name. That's fine. Don't. So you're thinking this guy's like, I'm so freaking amazingly engaged with this empire that I'm building that I couldn't stick my head out of the water for 2 seconds to send you an email. It's unbelievable. And here's why it's unbelievable. This guy's, I can go to Twitter and Facebook and see that you're posting cat pictures. So I know that you're not that busy. You're not, you're not replacing Russia in the G8, man. Like, you got a second to send an email. Don't put this most important. I mean, this is high level networking for your business. You know, and this is the same thing if you're doing a book launch or something. Email me personally, man. I don't want to hear from so-and-so marketing agency firm from New York City that doesn't know anything about marketing anyway. Rant over.
If you want to know the real deal, if you listen to the episode, the Twist episode, Marc Cuban is the guy. And Marc Cuban, his email is a well-known secret on the internet, his actual email. Marc Cuban will respond to your emails. You know, he talks directly with those people. Marc Cuban isn't talking through his assistant. So, you know, two things. One, I think it's not cool to act baller when you're not baller. And you're not famous, so don't have your assistant contact you. And the second thing is, it just kind of depends on the kind of person that you are, you know? I don't know. I'd rather be like Marc Cuban, and it sounds like you would too.
Well, I'm going to have my assistant send an email out to Marc Cuban. He sounds like a cool guy. All right, this one's at tropicalmba.com/location independent. Thank you. Ian, you're such a baller. I noticed, man, you're not even on the social medias. I know that you're so busy with your life and your enterprise, your empire. So thankful that you took the time out to come and not send your Manila virtual assistant.
We'll talk about it.
All right. We'll be back next Thursday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Tropical MBA podcast. You can go to tropicalmba.com, get access to hundreds of back episodes and all kinds of other goodies. Load up your iPod. That is the cheapest way to fly business class on your next international flight. We will see you next Thursday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.